Decades after their renowned collaborations and nearly a decade after Wilder's quiet, sorrowful passing, comic veteran Mel Brooks, at 99 years old, has finally spoken out about Gene. However, what he disclosed goes beyond a mere homage or a nostalgic trip down memory lane. It's unexpected, emotional, and raw for some fans. Brooks was known for his limitless energy and outspoken demeanor. So many puzzled why he spoke so little when Wilder died. People worried about this for years. Nothing happened. There were no long interviews, no fiery public remarks, no retrospectives filled with emotion, just quiet. Plus, when an outspoken and fearlessly daring actor like Mel Brooks stays silent in Hollywood, it carries a lot more weight than it appears. Finally, after a long silence, Brooks has spoken, and this has led to renewed interest in the relationship, new theories among fans, and old questions. Did their on-screen relationship really work out so well? Did factors other than age and time contribute to their creative split? Why, therefore, did Brooks hold off until he was almost a century old before speaking? Two comedic greats aren't the only ones involved here. It touches on topics such as friendship, loss, secrecy, and the unsettling realities that sometimes lurk beyond the surface of joy. You might never look at Gene Wilder the same after hearing what Mel Brooks has to say. Mel Brooks' journey from World War II soldier to Oscar-winning legend and History of the World Part II creator. Mel Brooks is one of the few surviving titans of a golden era in American entertainment, and he's 99 years old. His life narrative is filled with more than simply comic genius. It's also one of determination, personal growth, and a dedication to entertaining others. Melvin James Kaminsky was born Melvin Brooks on June 28, 1926, in Brooklyn, New York. He was reared by a single mother following his father's untimely death, and he came from a modest Jewish family. He learned to deal with adversity through humor as a child growing up in the midst of the Great Depression, which sharpened his sense of humor and wit. In the wake of Pearl Harbor, Brooks enlisted in the United States Army, served as a combat engineer in the European theater of the war from 1944 to 1946. He began his career in show business after the war as a radio and television writer. Behind the scenes, Brooks was already creating a name for himself in the late 1940s and 1950s on hit shows like Your Show of Shows and the Admiral Broadway Review, where he collaborated with Carl Reiner, Sid Caesar, and other burgeoning comic geniuses of the day. His career was defined for decades by his writing style, which was quick, intelligent, and energetic. Brooks wed Florence Baum in 1951, and they had 3 children together. The marriage may have ended in divorce in 1962, but it was around this time that Brooks established his family, which would serve as a rock for the rest of his life and career. In 1965, he and Buck Henry co-created the satirical TV series Get Smart, which propelled his creative drive to new heights. With its hilarious writing and unforgettable characters, Get Smart was a superb satire of the spy genre that brought Brooks his first major television triumph. The show ran successfully until 1970. However, Mel Brooks did not formally introduce himself to the film industry until 1967. The Producers, a daring comedy starring Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder, was his debut feature film that same year, and he wrote and directed it. At first, the film's use of Nazi parody caused it to be controversial. The plot revolves around a scheme to profit from creating a Broadway failure. However, it eventually became a cult classic and won Brooks an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. In addition to laying the groundwork for future collaborations, the film signified the start of his productive working relationship with Wilder. Brooks wed actress Anne Bancroft in 1970, and the couple remained together until Bancroft's death in 2005. They had a very loving and supportive marriage, an uncommon and lasting connection in the frequently unpredictable realm of Hollywood. Brooks was reaching the pinnacle of his career about the middle of the 1970s. 2 of his most famous films, Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles, were released that year, 1974. Both revolutionized the comedic landscape in the United States and were critically and commercially acclaimed. While Blazing Saddles sarcastically tackled racial and social taboos in westerns, Young Frankenstein, which Wilder co-wrote, lovingly homaged to the 1930s horror genre while being amusing. These films propelled Brooks to the pinnacle of American cinematic greatness and solidified his status as a genre parody master. His talent for combining smarts with silliness, comedy with sarcasm, and vice versa set him apart in a field that was wary of trying new things. In 1977, Brooks released High Anxiety, a spoof of Alfred Hitchcock's films, refocusing his creative energies on the suspense genre. Although it was met with less acclaim than his previous works, it demonstrated Brooks' extensive understanding of film forms and his dedication to utilizing humor to pay tribute to and subtly poke fun at the pioneers who came before him. Part 1 of History of the World came out 4 years later, in 1981, a wildly irreverent satire that tackled historical events from all angles. Despite initial backlash, the show's wild comedy and musical numbers won over younger viewers and helped propel it to cult classic status. Spaceballs, released in 1987, was the latest in Brooks's series of genre parodies. It offered a humorous spin on science fiction masterpieces like Star Wars. Despite receiving mixed reviews at first, Spaceballs managed to gain a loyal fan base and has subsequently earned a reputation as one of Brooks's most cherished features, especially among science fiction enthusiasts who cherished its ingenuity and fondness for the genre it critiqued. Blazing Saddles, the producers, and Mel Brooks's battle against PC are all rooted in his contentious past. Mel Brooks has never shied away from controversy, despite a career defined by invention, critical praise, and an everlasting legacy of humor. Brooks, one of the most daring voices in comedy, has never shied away from pushing the boundaries of humor, which has earned him fans and detractors alike. Using comedy, and even criticism, across his career, Brooks challenged cultural, political, and social taboos. His work is firmly grounded in satire, and although some have questioned the consequences and implications of his decisions, others have praised his bold, humorous vision. Particularly in Blazing Saddles and other of his films, he is heavily criticized for perpetuating racial, ethnic, and religious stereotypes. According to Brooks, the intention behind the 1974 release of the Western spoof was to poke fun at racism with its profusion of racial insults and exaggerated caricatures. The movie has sparked heated discussions for quite some time. It is seen by some as a bold and rebellious statement against bigotry in the United States. But some contend that it can be detrimental to repeatedly employ racist tropes and abusive words, especially in comedy. Even if the film's message and goal were revolutionary, contemporary viewers have had trouble understanding how the film's sardonic tone relates to our more delicate cultural milieu. Whether this kind of humor goes beyond or perpetuates the stereotypes it depicts is an open topic. The Producers, in which Brooks portrayed Nazis in a comic light, was another contentious film. He fearlessly presented a made-up musical titled Springtime for Hitler in 1967, which garnered him an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. The film featured ostentatious song sequences and a theatrical portrayal of Adolf Hitler. Some, particularly in post-war America, found the idea repugnant and disturbing, but many others saw the picture for what it was, a potent satire that ridiculed fascism via humor. The decision to make fun of such a tragic period in history was met with criticism by those who felt it was inappropriate. The film's creator, Jewish World War II veteran Albert Brooks, has long maintained that its purpose was to degrade Hitler by making fun of him. He maintained that satire may be a weapon of resistance, a means of bringing evil to light via its own absurdity. Regardless of his intentions, the use of Nazism and the Holocaust in humorous contexts has always been taboo, particularly in groups that have been profoundly impacted by such events. Recent years have also seen controversy about Brooks' outspoken opposition to PC. Political correctness, in his perspective, has stifled comedy, and he has openly voiced his disapproval, notably saying, "We have become ridiculously politically correct, which is the death of comedy." A key component of comic art, according to Brooks, is the capacity to incite, magnify, and question conventions. He thinks satire should be unsettling because it shows ugly realities. There have been varying reactions to this position, even though we live in a time when people are more aware of the importance of social and cultural factors. His worries have been shared by several comedians, maintaining humor as an arena for unrestrained communication. Some, nevertheless, worry that the same risky or daring things that people used to think are spreading damaging ideas, especially in the case of jokes that bring people down instead of up. It is difficult to see some of Brooks's earlier work solely through a humorous prism due to the shifting terrain of public conversation. Yet his legacy as an innovator of courageous humor is undeniable. A second point raised in reviews of Brooks's films is that the female characters in his earlier films are underdeveloped and underrepresented. Female characters in films such as Blazing Saddles and History of the World, Part 1 are sometimes criticized for being reduced to sexualized figures or comedic relief without substantial narrative development. Mainstream comedies often used this technique in the 70s and 80s. However, with the changing discourse surrounding gender representation, modern audiences and critics have rethought these depictions. Although it was never his intention, one thing that has been apparent in Brooks' otherwise rich storytelling legacy is the lack of strong, multidimensional female characters. Viewers of his films now realize that his satirical brilliance frequently failed to recognize women's potential as integral parts of the humorous story. Having said that, Brooks has on occasion responded to this criticism with humility, recognizing the passage of time and the necessity for more inclusive narrative. One more general complaint is that, although self-deprecating and meant to reveal injustice, Brooks's humor occasionally made light of weighty historical events. In the first installment of History of the World, Brooks used horrific periods, like enslavement, blazing saddles, and the Inquisition, as punchlines. His supporters say that by making fun of nasty and ignorant people, his comedies make horror more approachable. Certain who disagree with this strategy, however, worry that it would downplay the serious pain associated with certain topics. Juggling historical insensitivity with irreverent comedy is like walking a tightrope. Humor, according to Brooks, is a resistance mechanism, a means of coping with suffering, injustice, and terror. He has admitted that satirizing such material is difficult. Because he is a Jewish artist who lived through the Holocaust and saw anti-Semitism firsthand, his comedy philosophy is based on the need to survive. He sees laughing as a means to face suffering, not an escape from it. Gene's journey from his Broadway days to his work with Willy Wonka, Richard Pryor, and his silent fight with Alzheimer's. There was richness, tenderness, and emotional depth in Gene Wilder's life and career, just as there was in his on-screen persona. Due to Wilder's status as Mel Brooks's closest friend and creative collaborator, her life narrative is inextricably bound up with the legacy that Brooks has left behind. Born Jerome Silberman in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on June 11, 1933, Wilder was raised in a Jewish home similar to Brooks's. He discovered solace and fulfillment in storytelling and performing on stage at a young age, and this drew him to the performing arts. He studied acting seriously after graduating from the University of Iowa with a degree in 1955, first at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School in England, and then at the HB Studio in New York City under the renowned Lee Strasberg. During his formative years, he honed his technique and developed the versatility that would shape his subsequent roles. The deftness to portray both intense intensity and raw vulnerability, frequently all in the same scene. He was unique among his contemporaries due to his classical schooling and his innate comic sensibility. Mel Brooks was captivated by this combination of discipline and unpredictability, which led to the beginning of one of the most legendary partnerships in comic history. It wasn't until 1961, thanks to his early theater work, that Wilder made his Broadway debut in Roots, and Bancroft co-starred with her in Mother Courage and Her Children. It turned out that producing was more than just a stage credit. Mel Brooks, Bancroft's partner, was introduced to him as a result. Wilder was an emotionally complicated, eccentric, and smart soul, and Brooks found a soulmate in her right away. They hit it off right away, and after working together for a while, Brooks cast Wilder as the lead in his debut feature picture. Wilder had a brief but noteworthy appearance in 1967's Bonnie and Clyde, playing a nervous hostage opposite Warren Beatty, prior to that historic partnership. The role that would define Wilder's early career, Leo Bloom, in The Producers, came a year after the performance, which drew attention. With Wilder starring as an anxious, neurotic accountant entangled in a plot to manufacture a Broadway failure, the picture was a tumultuous and irreverent satire written and directed by Brooks. Together, they started a creative partnership that would change comedy forever, and his performance got him nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. In 1971, Wilder continued to climb to stardom with his role as Willy Wonka in The Chocolate Factory. Despite the film's initial commercial failure, it went on to become an iconic cultural reference. A performance filled with mysterious allure and nuanced emotional signals, Wilder's portrayal of Willy Wonka was both charming and disturbing. A figure from children's literature became an everlasting emblem of mystery and imagination because to his gentle voice, unexpected spurts of energy, and otherworldly presence. People of all ages would grow to love this part, and it is now considered a cinematic classic. The year 1974 marked the pinnacle of Wilder's career. In that year alone, he was the lead in two seminal comedies, Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles. Mel Brooks' caustic parody of racist westerns and characters like the Waco Kid, who he played in Blazing Saddles, was a former gunslinger. Despite the film's controversy, it was a huge success, and Wilder's quiet, worn charisma was the ideal counterpoint to the mayhem. Young Frankenstein, in which he also had a writing credit, was a critical and financial smash because to Wilder's performance, which skillfully combined horror illusions with bellyaching comedy. The critically acclaimed picture solidified Wilder's reputation as a master storyteller as well as an accomplished performer. Working on multiple projects with comic Richard Pryor in the late 1970s and early 1980s was a turning point in Wilder's career. They struck up a special on-screen chemistry that fans all over the globe loved. Their 1976 action comedy Silver Streak was their debut feature picture together. It combined slapstick with elements of mystery. After that, in 1980, there was the smash hit comedy Stir Crazy, which was among the highest-grossing films of its period. See No Evil, Hear No Evil, 1989, and Another You, 1991, were the next films in their collaboration, which was carried forward by the contagious chemistry between the two leads despite occasional dips in screenplay quality. The pairing of a white Jewish comedian with a black comic icon was unprecedented at the time, and their collaborations were significant for breaching racial boundaries in mainstream Hollywood comedy. Fans continue to treasure the indelible bond that developed between Wilder and Pryor on screen, even though the movie critical reaction was mixed. The 83-year-old Gene Wilder died on August 29, 2016, from symptoms associated with Alzheimer's disease, a diagnosis he had concealed for a while. It wasn't the unexpectedness of his death that shocked people. It was Wilder's decision to keep his pain hidden from the world. He reportedly did not want youngsters who looked up to him as Willy Wonka to experience fear or sadness, and his family attests to it. Perhaps the last act of love from a man who had spent his life making other people happy was that decision, which was very personal and characteristic of his nature. With the support of those closest to him and the knowledge that his life had inspired countless others, Wilder gracefully weathered his latter years. When he passed away, it was the end of an era in comedy, Mel Brooks, and Hollywood. Studio disputes, Gene Wilder's position against Hollywood remakes, and his critique of Willy Wonka. Although Gene Wilder's legacy is undeniably bright, it must not be forgotten that, like many multifaceted artists, he had a contentious career. Wilder was sometimes the target of criticism, creative conflicts, and public misunderstandings, despite the fact that he was adored by millions and lauded for his complex performances. His 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, in which he played the legendary role of Willy Wonka, was an early example of this. The way Wilder portrayed the quirky chocolatier surprised some critics and parents at the film's first release. Although he was in a family film, his manner could abruptly change from carefree and humorous to somber and disturbing. Some critics even went so far as to say the acting was too strange or annoying, raising the question of whether the film's chaotic tone was suitable for a family film. Nevertheless, as time went on, this ambiguity became an endearing aspect of the character. Later generations have really appreciated the character's complexity, which Wilder achieved by portraying Wonka as enigmatic and ethically ambiguous. Ironically, Wilder's performance became famous, and the picture went on to become a classic, thanks in large part to the exact thing that caused initial alarm. Studio disputes over artistic control were a major source of stress for Wilder throughout his career. He aspired to mold the characters' souls rather than merely repeat lines or follow directions. He made it clear in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, where his character infamously insisted on walking with a limp before doing a backflip. He went on to say that this would cast doubt on Wonka's credibility and veracity right from the outset. Wilder remained steadfast in the face of opposition from studio officials who were worried it would perplex or turn off viewers. One of the most iconic opening sequences in cinematic history came to fruition when the company finally caved. Wonka wasn't the only one involved in these conflicts over creative choices. Wilder consistently fought against modifications that he saw as incompatible with his creative vision. Many of his followers and colleagues respected his dedication to honesty and excellence in performance, even though this made him seem tough to some executives. Even his most recent partnerships with Richard Pryor, a fellow artist, were not without their share of rocky patches. Their chemistry and groundbreaking ideas in their early films, such as Stir Crazy and Silver Streak, were highly acclaimed, while their subsequent works were met with ambivalent or even critical acclaim. Watch No Evil, Hear No Evil, and similar films. Some people thought your scripts were weak and your acting was clunky. Studios interfering, tight timetables, and Pryor's MS health problems supposedly plagued these movies behind the scenes. Reports of friction between the two performers started circulating on site, even though there was never any public animosity between them. But in interviews, Wilder and Pryor never once used derogatory language, and their mutual regard and admiration for one another was constant. The pair's earlier successes were bittersweetly brought to light by the deterioration in quality of their subsequent projects, which both fans and critics lamented. When it came to revisiting material that Wilder loved, he was very outspoken about his distaste of Hollywood's preoccupation with remakes and reboots. His infamous insult-laden critique of Tim Burton's 2005 Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was well known. He had no personal beef with Johnny Depp, but he thought the remake was lacking in the original's nuance and passion. The general dissatisfaction with what Wilder perceived as the absence of innovation in modern cinema was emphasized by his remarks. Respect for the audience, humor, empathy, and character depth, rather than spectacle and repetition, were the hallmarks of his storytelling. His defense of creative integrity was met with mixed reactions. Some thought it was antiquated, while others praised him. His reluctance to be involved with or support contemporary remakes of his own works was not motivated by resentment, but by a strong conviction that certain tales did not necessitate retelling unless they contained fresh and significant elements. As his life came to a close, Gene Wilder progressively faded from public view. He started declining invitations for prominent parts, interviews, and public appearances after decades in the limelight. People in the public began to guess at his health problems and disillusionment with the entertainment industry as possible explanations. In an era where public access to celebrities was becoming more continuous and expected, rumors and tabloid speculation driven by his increased privacy persisted. Wilder was more concerned with maintaining peace than secrecy when he decided to go away. He had always been an introverted man. Many people began to make sense of his decision to step away from the limelight after hearing, following his death in 2016, that he had been fighting Alzheimer's disease for years. In keeping with the sensitivity he displayed throughout his life, Wilder reportedly chose to keep his sickness a secret to spare fans the pain and maintain the image he had with youngsters as Willy Wonka. Still, Wilder's views on contemporary comedy occasionally caused controversy, even in interviews given in his latter years. He frequently expressed his dismay at what he believed to be a fall in the art of comedy and the resulting increase in what he viewed as sloppy and coarse humor. His main point was that great comedic moments used to be more nuanced and emotionally intelligent, but now they're all about slapstick, vulgarity, and shock value. Although a lot of people agreed with his evaluations, some thought he was being too aristocratic or too disconnected from modern audiences. Some younger comics and fans thought Wilder's view failed to take into account how comedy is always changing and failed to recognize the merit of more contemporary styles and performers. Some, though, respected his candor and felt the same way he did about the need for a comedic style that was less scripted and more character-driven. Whether or not his opinions were accepted, they revealed a man who was passionate about comedy and thought it should never be watered down. The first comprehensive homage to Gene Wilder's life, work, and personal troubles by Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks, who is incredulously 99 years old, has revealed a rare and touching peek into his unique connection with Gene Wilder, his lifelong friend and creative collaborator. With each other, Brooks and Wilder created some of the most memorable comedies in American cinematic history for many years. Until now, Brooks had mostly kept his thoughts about Wilder to himself, despite the fact that they had worked together and achieved a lot of success. The much-anticipated quiet has been shattered with raw emotion, candor, and a rekindled respect for the immense influence that Wilder had on both comedy and Brooks' personal life. In interviews, Brooks painted a picture of Wilder as an inspiring yet grounded intellect. He thought back on Wilder's talent for making her characters feel real despite their ridiculousness by striking a unique mix between vulnerability and humor. Everything they worked on together, from the producers to Young Frankenstein and beyond, was influenced by Wilder's imagination and energy, according to Brooks. Brooks claimed that Wilder was more than just a co-star. He was like a brother to me, a fellow entertainer who shared my love of the limelight as well as its ups and downs. According to Brooks, this alliance is unparalleled in comic history. It was born out of shared laughter, hardship, and respect. Even Wilder's controversies have been discussed by Brooks, given the actor's struggles, both in and out of the spotlight. Despite the fact that some people found Willy Wonka uncomfortable at first, he said that Wilder's daring choices made Wonka unforgettable and enduring, discussing the early reaction of Wilder in both films. Despite studio resistance, Wilder stuck fast on creative autonomy, which Brooks liked, as seen in the now-famous limp and somersault entrance in Willy Wonka. According to Brooks, Wilder's commitment to authenticity was exemplified by this type of artistic conviction. Additionally, Brooks brought attention to the challenges that arose during Wilder's subsequent partnerships with Richard Pryor, elaborating on how studio meddling and health concerns impacted their work, yet they maintained a mutual respect. Wilder was very protective of the film's original essence and suspicious of later copies that lacked heart. Brooks concurred with this assessment when asked about Wilder's views on Hollywood remakes. These details show that he was a guy who understood the significance of protecting the legacy they created together and who, like Wilder, prioritized honesty over financial gain. In addition to his professional awe, Brooks has pondered Wilder's personal struggles and the poise with which he overcame them. He went on to explain that Wilder wanted to protect his admirers and the happy memories they had of him, so he decided to keep his Alzheimer's diagnosis a secret. Cited this choice as evidence of Wilder's character, highlighting his compassion and kindness, even in trying times. According to Brooks, their connection went beyond simply sharing jokes. It was a source of constant strength when times were bad. Despite dealing with fame, tragedy, and illness with elegance, he lauded Wilder for his resiliency and modesty. According to Brooks, who recently gave an interview, Wilder left an indelible mark on the lives of those closest to him, and these remarks highlight the profoundness of their bond. The entertainment industry and fans alike have been profoundly affected by Brooks's lengthy silence and subsequent devastating admissions. Many have been thankful to hear his introspective tales and personal reflections, which enrich Wilder's legacy. Reviewers have pointed out that by delving further into Wilder's life and paintings, Brooks' commentary brings a human element to the artist, allowing us to see beyond his public image. Because of how open and honest Brooks was, we see Wilder for who he really was, a complex artist who bravely and creatively overcame adversity. Their cooperation is defined by uncommon loyalty and respect, as discussed in interviews with Brooks. Their relationship is based on profound mutual admiration as well as professional accomplishment. By looking at it from this angle, we can learn more about the men and the magic they made together, reminding viewers of the reasons their films have captivated fans for so long.